Welcome to the Functional Nurse Podcast, where we explore how nurses are transforming healthcare through functional medicine and nurse-led innovation. I'm your host, Brigitte Sager, founder of the Institute for Functional Nursing. Here, we're reclaiming our role as healers and leaders, one root cause conversation at a time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Functional Nurse Podcast. My name is Brigitte Sager, and I'm your host. And on our episode today, I have an incredibly exciting guest. We've been trying to lock this down for a little while because I know that you guys want to hear from her. Monique Class is a nurse practitioner that has a lot of connections with the Integrative Nurse Coach Academy that you're going to hear about. I'm going to let everybody know your bio a little bit so they know a bit more about you. Monique is a board certified family nurse practitioner and a clinical nurse specialist in holistic health, and she has 35 years of experience in nursing, functional and integrative medicine. She's passionate about educating, cultivating, and facilitating vitality, health, and well-being. Monique is a thought leader and sought-after educator in the field of functional medicine, mind-body medicine, and coaching. She lectures nationally and internationally on women's health, mind-body practices, nutrition, and coaching. She is senior faculty member for the Institute for Functional Medicine, clinical instructor for the Yale Graduate School of Nursing, a senior faculty member for the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, and director of coaching development for the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. Along with her advanced degrees in nursing, she holds certifications from the Psychosynthesis Institute, the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, Yoga Alliance, and dual board certifications in coaching from AHNCC and NBC HWC. Monique, thank you so much for being with us today. I would love for you to start by letting everybody know a little bit more about your background, how you became a nurse, and what led you to functional medicine.
Yeah, well, I never wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to
Wow.
be an artist. I love the creative aspect of life and healing. My dad was a college professor at the college in North Shell, and he started the nursing program there. And he said, you'd be a great nurse. You can always do art on the side. I got into University of Virginia and got into their nursing school. And that was the days where they'd interview you. And I sat down for an interview. They were asking me all kinds of questions. And at that point, I was like fascinated about taking care of people, end of life. And, I'm like, whatever I was, 17 or 18 years old, but I wanted to work in hospice. Like I knew that right away, that I was fascinated by death and spirituality, all kinds of things. I land down there, and University of Virginia in the day was kind of a hub of like cool, interesting speakers. The nursing school is like at one part of the campus, and you were supposed to take all your courses there. But then they had like Ram Dass and Kubler-Ross coming and speak, and yeah, and they had Richie Davidson and all kinds of meditation teachers in main campus on different things. I would cut nursing school and go over to listen to all these lectures, and almost got kicked out of nursing school at University of Virginia. They're like, "You're missing class." I was like, "Well, I'm going to these classes." They said, "But you've got to pass the classes you're in." The biggest thing for me is I love nursing, but they weren't pointing at spirituality at the level I wanted, or nutrition. There were things missing from the curriculum, even though I appreciated the medical curriculum. So I was bumping up against it. And finally, I realized, let me just get my degree and then look for further study that allows me to express that creative part of my nature. And what I realized was that healing is creative. And when you're working with clients and you're coaching, it's a ton of creativity because it's never done the same way, because it's self-directed, patient-driven. When you're in the moment with people, new ideas come in, and it's not rote. It's not, an algorithm. It's not looking at a system and, well, you have this symptom, I'll give you this drug. It really is much more integrated and holistic for me. I began to kind of find my way. And at the time, I was lucky I graduated and I came back here, and I heard that uh, Barbara Dossi and a couple other people were working on creating a curriculum as a clinical nurse specialist in holistic nursing, where they were looking at the roots of nursing from NYU, like all of Dolores Krieger's work and all of the energetic work, kind of like the mystical parts of nursing and healing. And they got it into a curriculum, and I was part of the first graduating class to go through that curriculum and come with a degree, and it was super cool. We were studying quantum physics, and that's where I did psychosynthesis and spent a couple of months in New York City learning meditation and imagery and healing and all kinds of like super cool things. And my clinical rotation happened to be doing energy work in the operating room with Dr. Oz before he was famous. This is when he was just starting to get things off the ground. I was sent down there. He didn't know anything about holistic medicine or nursing or anything like that. But he was interested in seeing, could we change outcomes on patients going through open heart surgery? Because I'm saying a lot, but that day, if you were waiting for a heart, you had to stay in the hospital because the LVAD machines that kept you going while you were waiting for a heart were so big and so huge that you
Not
were locked
portable.
into a floor. Not portable. I'd hang there and I do energy work and meditation and imagery. And then when their hearts would come in, we'd get called and we'd go and we'd do energy work on the hearts and then go in the operating room and do energy work and hypnosis on them. And we're studying it. I was writing the IRBs. I mean, I was like blessed. It was like a dream. And like no one knew who he was, but cameras started to come in and then he went on his path and me and a couple of my nurse colleagues, we went on our paths. But that was like my launching point for the possibility of being a nurse and what you could do with all that and different dimensions of healing. And how do you blend all of these things into a tapestry that the patient's in the center and you're using all your tools. Yeah. Open heart surgery, you're using meditation, you're using imagery, you're using everything you know how to use in the best interest of the patient. And what you're going to use is going to be flexible depending on the situation. That's the creative part, is that we've got all of these things and looking at the dimensions of a human being in that kind of tapestry just lit me up. When I left there, again, I was blessed. Met up with a physician. I was trying to work hospice at Stanford Hospital. They didn't have a spot. They threw me on OB. I was like, okay, fine, I'll stay here while I'm waiting. And I ended up meeting a young physician at the time that was interested in holistic medicine, or what I knew, what I had to offer, but didn't know much about it. I started working in his practice and we did it. We started working on women's health and doing it during pregnancy, all kinds of different interesting things around nutrition and energy work and hypnosis and mind body medicine. And he started to get into functional medicine. I wasn't into functional medicine, but Dr. Joe Levins, he became interested in functional medicine and he kind of turned me on early on. It was a small band of physicians, just a tiny bunch, most of which were males and all of which were MDs or PhDs. There were no nurses. No nurses lectured for them. They didn't even really know what nurses did or whatever. But I started hanging out with them and they don't see bias. Like, if you show up and you've got interesting things to say and you understand what they're saying and you're passionate and I just jumped in because functional medicine kind of hit all my big ticket items. It was a system of thinking. Patients were in the center. It had the therapeutic partnership component, and it had a system of looking, the systems biology approach where all the systems of the body are connected and not separate silos. And I was like, I found my home. And I did. They asked me to lecture on the therapeutic connection because that's their weak spot. And as nurses, that's our strong spot, right? We know how to listen to the story. We know how to bond with people, which is, in my opinion, is 50% of the healing, is that energetics between practitioner and patient. They knew it was important, but they didn't know how to teach it. Kudos to them. They threw me up there. And my first couple of lectures, I got panned. I mean, they were like, she's not as smart as the doctors, because I was lecturing to doctors and it was too soft for them. They weren't interested in that part of the equation, but they kept me on, right? Because they valued it. There was an audience bias, right? You had very type A driven clinicians that they didn't know that part of themselves. They
Right.
didn't think it mattered, right? I want to learn functional medicine because I want to know, well, what herb do I give for this? What test do I do for this? And that's not, functional medicine isn't about testing. It's not about supplements. It's about systems biology and a way to figure out, listen to the patient's story, connect with the patient, and figure out, like, how do you bring people
Yes.
back to wellness? What do you need to get rid of? What do you need to add in? And they have a system for thinking about that and organizing yourself around that, but it's patient driven, right? So they kept me on and it caught on. People started to be interested, then they wanted to know about me. So I started teaching meditation. I started having all these doctors meditate at the end of my lecture. And they just gave me license to do all of this nursing stuff. I talked about nursing. I led with that I'm a nurse, and they supported me, which was like, completely validating and unheard of in the day for physicians to put nurses center stage and let them lecture to them. It was like, yeah. The first half of my career, I never lectured to nurses. I was always lecturing to doctors, which was like weird. Like I didn't even know how to lecture to nurses because I was so used to having to put things a particular way. Like you have to, I always used to laugh. I used to say, you have to access them. You have to come out with the science
Yep.
first. Like I had to know the science better than anybody else because for them to listen to me, I had to rattle off every single study, every single pathway. I had to know the electron transport. I had to razzle dazzle them. And then they would listen to what I really wanted to say. I was like, once you got the formula, like hit them first with their mind and then drop to their hearts, not the other way around. I was good, but I really found a home there and they've supported my growth, my education. They've embraced nursing. And especially, David Jones, who was the president at the time, loved nurses, wanted to bring nurses into the conversation. And, my dear friend, and I miss her dearly, Susan Luck was also, as a nutritionist and a nurse, part of our organization, Inca here. She really led the charge with bringing in nutrition for nurses and bringing in functional medicine. I mean, she was connected to it, as early as I was. She was kind of in the backdrop and really where I was doing it talking to clinicians, bringing nursing language to clinicians. She was boots on grounds, bringing functional medicine to nurses. We were doing it parallel play, but different tracks, and then we'd come together. It's been an honor, and I just can't believe the evolution. And Brigitte, like I said before I got on, I'm just so happy to have Brigitte out there, like leading the charge with this, educating nurses and organizing us and getting the word out in this great way. All the people at IFM are so pleased with the work you're doing and the authentic way in which you're presenting the content. Couldn't be happier and prouder and love
Thank
having you
you.
out there with me. It's nurses have a huge part to
Yes,
play
and
in
I
the
wanna yeah,
movement.
I wanna acknowledge that IFM was like, "We want to empower nurses. That we know that this is a need and a benefit to everybody." I'm thinking as you're telling your story that this whole time that you're working with Dr. Evans, who is one of the lead educators for IFM also, that you happened to connect with all that time ago and, still working with, that all this time, Dr. Dossi that you mentioned in the beginning is growing nurse coaching and building the Integrative Nurse Coach Academy with Susan Luck that you just mentioned as well. So, we say Inca, I think interchangeably when we're talking about the Integrative Nurse Coach Academy, but I wanted to acknowledge that like this whole time that functional medicine is blossoming, nurse coaching was too. And you have a lot of roots in Inca as well. I would love if you would share a little bit about your nurse coaching journey because a lot of our listeners have done the program through Inca and they're using it with functional medicine now.
Yeah, well, it's that's thrilling. What I loved about Inca, besides everything, was that they brought everybody together on site at the time in these small communities, and they really taught people how to coach and connect and use all your nursing skills. Just because you're a coach doesn't mean you throw out your scope of practice. It's an elevated scope of practice where you're blending the art of co-creating these care plans going back and forth, and you're not doctor dictator or, if you're a nurse practitioner, you're not telling someone what to do. You're not doing something to somebody, but they really taught you how to thread the needle of doing something with somebody and allowing it to unfold in that person. And the way they did it is by making you have your own personal experience in the room with somebody doing that to you and you doing that. They taught from the inside out in the sacred circle model. They really created bonds and connection and interesting information, and they lit people up with all of it. All of it was on the table. The medicine was on the table. The Bonnie and Richard at that time, when I first started, were part of Inca. They were teaching psychosynthesis and meditation. They had Larry Dossi come talk about quantum healing. Just incredible. Again, these are brilliant quantum thinkers in both fields. Barbara and Susan and David Jones and Jeff Bland, brilliant thinkers that think outside the box. They're not locked into their disciplines, but they understand the connectedness of all the disciplines and the collaborative care team. And what's needed for healing is a collaborative care team. Nurses are a big part of that collaborative care team because they speak both languages, right? They got
Yes.
dual passportship. They can speak medicine, they can speak spirituality, they can speak coaching, right? It's an easy thing for us. We're bilingual. where most people aren't. Most disciplines aren't. They're locked into their one discipline. We can rock and roll back and forth. And we should know nutrition. Nutrition is part of our scope of practice. We should be able to work with food as medicine. We should understand it. We should be able to educate on it. We should be out there promoting and understanding if someone's got particular labs, how can you work with them to move the dial, both with nutrition, movement, any hormetic changes like sauna and ice baths, or they should be able to educate on all of these natural things and understand the science and how to work with people. Because I think I feel like that's our role, is to tie it all together. Different, if you're an RN, you're going to be doing it at a different level than an APRN, but it doesn't matter. It's still at an advanced level in
We
my
talk
mind.
about scope all the time, and that, education is in every nurse's scope of practice. We don't have to tell people what to do. I love that term you used a minute ago, co-creating a care plan with a patient, because it's not about us talking at people anymore when we're a coach and when we're using functional medicine. It's about giving them some more information. And, the nutrition for nurses course that I have coming, you were touching on nutrition, and a big part of that in the beginning is just talking about scope of practice again, because nurses talk to people about food all the time. The thing that I get a lot of backlash on from people is nurses can't diagnose and prescribe. And I'm like, well, we don't want to prescribe anything, but there is the nursing process, and it is ADPI, right? And diagnosis in there. And so we do diagnose people. And I feel like the nursing diagnoses really reflect functional medicine practices a lot better than a lot of medical diagnoses do. But I wanted to circle back to what you were saying. You mentioned Dr. Bland, and I was thinking about how a lot of time when I describe functional medicine to people, I explain that we're acknowledging biochemistry, right? And you're talking about acknowledging the spiritual aspect of our health too. And Dr. Bland's a biochemist, right? He's a researcher, and he was so excited when I told him that we were going to have a nurses program for functional medicine, because he's like, this is what we have to do. This is the work that needs to happen, because he's seeing outside of his scope. It's easy for nurses to do that because we're taught to look at the big picture and look at all the key players in a patient's plan. But I would love to hear a little bit about, because you're an educator, and I would love to hear a little bit about how you're able to add in what you're seeing in functional medicine. Because, like, I've taught pre-licensure nurses before, and trying to add it in while they're just trying to get the basics is unique, right? Trying to, like, highlight the importance of these things while we're talking about pharmacology class, right? But for you, you're teaching higher level nursing students. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like?
Sure, super fun. I'm teaching the nurse practitioners at Yale come and come through as a clinical rotation. I love it. And they are just sponges for all the information. It's just being able to explain it to them. Say if somebody comes into my office and they're incredible. I'm giving an example that I had the other day. They're incredibly fatigued. They've got brain fog. I had the student with me. I had checked red blood cell mercury, had done some liver functions, had done some other heavy metals and toxics. Toxins were off the chart, lots of stuff going on. Liver was abnormal. They were eating tons of sushi, tons of fish, and they're fatigued because they have mercury. Explaining to the patient and the student that how mercury impacts the electron transport chain or the mitochondria's ability to make ATP. And then relating it back to what's going on. Like if the mitochondria can't make ATP and it's jammed up, it can't transport the electrons, it's going to cause these fatigue syndromes. It's going to cause migraine headaches. It's going to cause all of these symptoms that we like to label and then throw people on drugs or not know what to do, when the real answer is help them with phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification of the liver. It's teaching them what they can, and then what do they need to do with foods? What foods do they need to remove? They need to remove the sushi and the tuna and the fish. And then what do we need to do? We need to put in ingredients that increase phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification, gentle movement, saunas. How do you bring all of these elements together? I teach them, like, you don't just go by the lab value. You listen to the story. Like, what was she eating that caused the mercury in the first place? You got mercury. But if you're going to move out the mercury and you're going to keep people eating the fish, really threading the needle with just explaining how everything is important. The whole story is important. Science isn't taken out of the equation. You understand the physiology and the biochemistry, and you drop it into the story at a level that people can get. They need to understand the
Yes.
why. They need to understand the how it happened, and they need to have hope that they can clear it up, and they need to be empowered. And the back and forth is, well, where do you want to start? I mean, do you want to start with just eliminating fish first? And can you take one supplement, or can you take two supplements, or can you do saunas, or that's too much for you? It's the back and forth with the client after they're engaged and they know they can get better. You know what it is. This is what's happening. This is what we can do. Where can you start? What's available to you emotionally, financially? What's your startup capital for this? And then starting where they're able to start in these small little sound bites and move them in the direction of wholeness, kind of supporting them the whole way. I think, what the students connect with is this, it's alive, right? Like the patient's included, and there's methodology, and there's science, and there's creativity. I never know what someone's going to say when you ask them, like, well, where can you start with exercise? There can be thousands of different starting points. Maybe I'll just buy my running shoes. Like maybe I'll hula hoop. Like whatever their starting point is, I could have never figured that out if I just said, you
Yes.
need to do this, and locked everybody into a box. That's how I teach it. I let them look at the labs, and then every abnormal lab value, the patient walks out with a different care plan, because the care plan isn't written by me. It's like I give them a menu. I tell them where we want to go. They're the journeyer. They pick and choose how they want to get there. And we can get there multiple ways. How do you want to start? And then you keep bringing them back. I think what they saw is the dynamic nature of healing. And I'm always asking people about their stress and their sleep and life events, because like in functional medicine that we always talk about, you got the story, you got the triggering event. I've never been well since this event. And then you got the lifestyle that keeps the inflammation, the oxidative stress going, right? What are the things that are keeping the symptoms going? They didn't necessarily cause it, but they're keeping them sick. And how do we cool that down and get people back to a place of wholeness, right? I think they're excited by that because it's the healing art. Which I said in the beginning, I always wanted to be an artist, but I feel like I am an artist because it's the art of medicine combined with the science. Yeah, I think that's what nurses, Florence Nightingale in my mind was the first
Oh,
functional
yeah, I see
medicine
her
nurse.
quotes all the time, and I'm like, "Come on."
Come on. She's the first functional medicine nurse. She was looking at how the environment influences health and well-being, and all the systems are connected, and loving touch and healing and all of those things. In my mind, we were born to be functional medicine practitioners. It's just kind of learning. It's a new language, but once you kind of get the words, and the words are more fluid, the concepts are
Yes.
not complicated. It's just the words can be a little, when you first hear them, like, oh my God, I'll never understand that. It's not complicated once people can break it
Once
down
it
and teach
settles
it,
on
right?
you, right? Once you're like, "Oh, I see what okay." I have a friend that is a PA, and he was a nurse for a long time before he went to PA school. And I'm thinking about you talking about teaching nurse practitioners. He said, "The day that I started PA school is the day I stopped talking about the whole patient." And a lot of my RN students talk about going to nurse practitioner school, and and I know nurse practitioner school can get really caught up in diagnose and treat, and finding not a root cause, but coming up with a label to put on the patient, and then connecting a prescription or maybe a surgical procedure or something to that might mitigate symptoms. It's stepping away from nursing in some ways. And I know a lot of nurse practitioners have told me they felt that way. And you mentioned the term home, that functional medicine felt like you'd found your home. And that is what so many of my students have said to me. And that's how I felt. I think that, becoming a nurse practitioner for a lot of my students is a great option for them. And that's what they want to offer their patients. But the stuff we're talking about and what you're saying you're showing to your students in a visit with a patient is that whole big picture that's really nursing. It's not something that we're getting from nurse practitioner school. It's something that all of us can do more of in our practice, regardless of where we're at.
I'm talking about lifestyle all the time, and how lifestyle is impacting their symptomatology,
Yes.
right? All the time. I mean, that's the foundation of what I'm saying. And like, how do we engage with that? With connection and community and movement and sunlight and all those things. I think something you said, I always call it name it, tame it, blame it. What we learned in nurse practitioner school, well, name it, tame it, and then blame it for everything. And then you're good. You can hand them the prescription or send them off for the laparoscopy and you're good.
Yep. And
No, no,
if
no,
you
no.
have 5
That's
specialists, they're all gonna
of the
name it something different and not but the root cause could be the same for all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the cool things. If you have global inflammation in the body, right? And you go in, different. If it's a cardiologist, he's gonna blame it at cardiovascular disease, the inside of the vessels. If you're a rheumatologist, it's a it's a rheumatology problem. You have lupus, you have chronic fatigue syndrome. Depending on the lens, and people are very centric to their own lens. That's why I like being a family nurse practitioner, right? Because you've got a wider lens. You're not locked into I'm a GYN, so everything's a hormonal issue. You're not locked into I'm a rheumatologist, uh, rheumatological problem, but you're looking for the root cause of imbalance, which there's not a lot of things. I mean, inflammation and oxidative stress are the pivot point of every single chronic disease. What is causing the inflammation and oxidative stress in this particular person? What is it? Is it a toxin? Is it a food? Is it ongoing stress? Is it what they're eating? There's limited things, and you've got to unravel and figure out like what's the source of the larger thing and not stop right
Yes.
here. Right.
Next question I ask because I think the answer is always really inspiring. I think it's kind of obvious. When you have somebody come in and they have, their 5 specialists and all these problems that have been named and tamed and blamed, and they have all these prescriptions, and then they come to you and you look at the underneath part and they leave with a plan and they come back and they feel better. Like, can you talk about that? And in particular, what it's like for you as a practitioner, but also the way that it's like the things they didn't expect to get better, right? Because they have like a thing they want to fix. And that isn't how this works, right? I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what that's like in your practice.
I will. I'm going to give you an example. I had a young girl come in a couple of weeks ago with her mom, and she was a big soccer player. She had been to a sports medicine guy, an orthopedic guy. She had been to an orthopedic surgeon. She had been to a rheumatologist. She had been to an endocrinologist. She had been to her pediatrician. We got 6 people. She comes, and everybody gave her a different diagnosis. One said she needed surgery. The other one said she had compartmental syndrome in her legs, all this kind of stuff. Young kid going to college, sweet as can be, sits down in my chair. And I said, yeah, roll it. Tell me the story. You've never been well since. And her mom jumps in and says, I just have to say this. I've said this to because the daughter starts telling me the story. The mom says, I've said this to every single doctor and nobody cares. She's never been well since. She was playing soccer on this new turf field for 3 to 4 months. And the parents had to wait outside because of the fumes, the toxic fumes from the turf they put down with whatever toxins they had underneath, that she couldn't breathe. She developed asthma. She developed exercise intolerance because she was practicing and playing on this field for weeks and months, to the point where she was supposed to be an elite soccer player. She can't run a mile. Can't run a mile. She has a fatigue syndrome. She has, just her muscles give out on her, and she was an elite athlete. And the mother kept saying, I tell everybody this, and everybody says it's not an important part of the story. I said,
Right?
it's the story. It's the story. She had this big toxic, never had a problem. Her whole healthy, organic food, exercise, all that stuff. Never was well since the day she stepped on that field. All the parents had to wait outside in masks because the fumes were overwhelming. And she played for several weeks and months until she couldn't move anymore. Never been well since. And they said, well, you have compartmental syndrome, or whatever it's called, something with like the pain
Mhm.
in the legs. That's all that means, right? And they're like, well, ice it, put icy hot and cold. There's nothing we can do about it. Oh, well, we can do a surgery on it. We can cut it out. Well, all your labs looks good. I'm not really seeing anything. I looked at the young kid and I said, you have a mitochondropathy. Your mitochondria got injured.
And now a quick word about our sponsor, the Institute for Functional Nursing. IFN is the leading education and community platform for nurses bringing functional medicine into their practice. IFN offers everything from short, on-demand contact hour courses to the full functional nursing program, designed specifically for nurses and nurse practitioners ready to practice root cause, whole person care. If you're looking for connection and real-time learning, the Functional Nursing membership includes 4 live meetings every month where we cover case studies and have open discussions and connection. Come be a part of a movement that's redefining what it means to be a nurse. Visit fxnursing.com to learn more and join us. And now back to today's episode.
Like if we put your car in a garage and we turned it on, the reason why people die is the fumes kill all the mitochondria in the body. It's poison because you're killing the mitochondria. She got poisoned on that field, and she had some genetic SNPs where she couldn't clear the toxins. Bunch of the girls got sick, but they got sick in different ways depending on their genetic vulnerability, right? She got it in her muscles and she has this exercise intolerance. And like I said, she wanted to be an elite athlete, blah, 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 blah. Can't get better, can't play her sport, lonely, isolated, not with her team, depressed, a whole bunch of downstream consequences. And I started to say, do you know what the mitochondria is? Her eyes lit up. Loves biology, loves science, had just been studying the mitochondria, is writing a paper on the mitochondria, knew the electron transport chain. Her instructor had been explaining. This kid was super smart and super dialed in. Like she wants to be a doctor. I said, okay, mitochondria, we talked electron transport chain. I said, the fumes injure the mitochondria. You have a mitochondriopathy. We have to resuscitate it. We have to detox the toxins. We have to cleanse your body with different foods. We have to take some things out for a certain amount of time. We have to put some things in. I got to find out what the toxins are. I'll do a test, right? We'll do a specialty test to see what toxins you got exposed to. We'll move it out of your body. We'll get you better. She walked out of my office flying. It wasn't because of me. It's because someone was speaking her language, listened to her story, put the pieces together up here and not, oh, you've got compartmental syndrome. You need a surgery. You've got chronic fatigue syndrome. Like they're throwing labels on her, but no one had an answer for her of like, what do I do? We put her on all the mitochondria support, CoQ10, magnesium, macglycinate, the certain B vitamins, all the stuff. I did a test on her. I knew what she was deficient in. And then we gently detoxed her. We did her detox genomics. She had all these different SNPs where she can't process toxins the same way as everybody else. We upregulated her phase 2 enzymes, got her doing saunas, got her gently moving, changed the game. It's that kind of stuff that lights me up. It's being able to put it together in a scientific way, understand the story, validate people. Everybody dismissed the mother. The mother was right on point. And having it up here. And I was like, yeah, you have compartmental syndrome. You want to put that name on it, but that doesn't tell me why do you have it and what do we do about it? We stop at this is what you have. We don't
Mhm.
ask the next question. It's like, well, why do you have it and what can we do about it? And and the coaching question is, what are you able to do today? How can we start?
I love hearing these kinds of examples, and I think it's so great for the listeners to hear these kind of examples because I'm just imagining her going back to her pediatrician and saying, "Oh no, I don't need any of that stuff anymore." Whatever they may have prescribed from all these various providers. And not just the benefit to the patient because that's obviously main stage, but, like, let's acknowledge the burden on the healthcare system, right? Like, how long do we wait for people to get into referrals to specialists when the root cause is something that they need 5 specialists for? And in reality, we can address it and relieve that burden on the healthcare system, right? More providers can be focusing on asking why, like we are. I love talking to any nurses, like school nurses, nurses that are meeting people at a younger age, because it changes the course of their life, right? And like this story for her is probably her health story is going to inspire possibly her whole career, right? That she's going to learn from you the power she has to help other people heal. It's just remarkable. I love hearing stories like that because they happen all the time with functional medicine. And it's incredible to have a follow-up visit with somebody and have them say, "Oh no, that's not a problem for me anymore. That's not a problem either. I got rid of that medication."
It's the best. Sometimes there are times where it's not like I get rid of a med or add a med. And sometimes it's just about talking to them and finding out meaning and purpose and where they're aligned with and helping them move and get unstuck. And they think it's like I'm deficient in estrogen. That's why I'm depressed. It's because of my estrogen. Well, maybe, but I'm not prepared to say that. I mean, you're in a bad marriage. You haven't had a career in 30 years. You graduated from an Ivy League school. You're super smart. Your kids are off. Like, there could be more to it than I just hand you an estrogen patch. Like you're alive, you're vital, you're super smart. What do you want to do? Sometimes it's opening up the conversation and asking them the unexpected questions and not just sticking to a script of it's got to be a physical issue, right? Like what else? Yeah, I can give you estrogen, but it's probably bigger than that. Let's talk about these other things and giving them a place to put it so that they can witness themselves and someone is present for their story and they can start figuring it out and getting connections and moving in a direction of vitality. There's so many ways to do this. I'm not always doing exotic testing. I'm not. I did that particular day But a lot of times I'm doing a lot of stuff just off a quest and it's conversation and story and foods and movement. It's not high tech all the time, but I do know how to do that if
Yeah,
I
I
have
tell my
to.
students all the time about like the influence nurses can have just because people tend to have a lot of data already that can really move the needle for them if somebody helps them make the connections of, oh, I see your fasting blood sugar has been high for the last 5 years on these labs you shared with me. Has anybody ever talked to you about that? And then, what's going on, not just with food and movement, but with your stress and your sleep and, connecting all that for them. We don't have to use expensive tests, and most root causes are things that nurses are really capable of helping patients with without fancy stuff. And I think that's so important to get across because that is most of what we're doing, right? We're having conversations with our patients about lifestyle and stress and their relationships and what they're putting in their mouth and how long they're chewing it, right? It isn't about all those test
Those things.
results that young gal had that you just mentioned, those were very expensive and unnecessary if somebody had really just kind of addressed what she was exposed to in her life, right?
That's right. Yeah, 100%. And, something you said is really important. I mean, all these wearables that nurses are interacting with people, like my Aura
Yep.
Ring, just beginning to look at how people look at their sleep, right? Just track your sleep. Like the impact on sleep on metabolic health, it should not be underappreciated. It is a big player in metabolism and metabolic health. They did studies, really good studies, having people in a hospital setting where they sleep deprived them for 4 days and were checking their insulin, glucose, hemoglobin A1C, and then they let them sleep normally for 4 days. So it was like this crossover study with them. 2 days of sleep deprivation, they looked like somebody that hit insulin resistance and they were normal metabolically. And then it went back. 1 or 2 nights of interrupted sleep is impacting people at a cellular level. So having the data and having people track their sleep and then connect the dots using it as awareness tool. Well, does it happen when you drink alcohol? Does it happen when you're eating late at night? Like what gives you the interrupted sleep patterns and not getting enough REM? Like begin to connect the dots. Those are conversations we could have all the time. Doesn't matter whether you're an APRN or an RN, but looking at people's readiness score, looking at their steps, looking at the continuous, me and you were talking about continuous glucose monitors as an awareness tool, like what foods are really raising the dial and can you recover in 2 hours and go back to baseline? I mean, super important, easy data points that all nurses have the skill set, in my mind, to have these discussions with
Yes.
people and connect the
Yes.
dots.
I have something that I wanna sidestep to because we haven't talked about it much in the podcast before, and I know that you're gonna have some great answers, is, like, the students in my course get access to some of IFM's toolkit items. We handpick what we think will work best for them, and there's hundreds. I would love for you to talk a little bit about this whole, like, okay, you've talked about seeing patients, and you've talked about getting test results, and you've talked about the timeline and the matrix and all these. How in your practice are you what are your top thoughts on, like, how to organize this and make it streamlined enough to actually be practical?
Sure. I always give people IFM handouts after we meet. I attach them on the portal. I have taken the handouts and I've downloaded them onto my desktop so I can quickly put them on there. Some of my big ticket items are around the gut, meaning they've got handouts on what is fiber, how do you get more fiber. Fiber is super important, right? Fiber, the fiber you eat, and we're underdoing fiber, creates the short chain fatty acids that creates the GLP-1s that
Right.
everybody's on. But if you put in the fiber, you're going to make them. It changes the microbiome. It changes the personality of the microbiome. It creates butyrate, which is super important for healing the gut. Big ticket item is increase your fiber. It's got two things. What is fiber? How do I get more fiber? And probiotics in foods. How do you heal your microbiome? Those are like some foundational handouts that I give people. And then uh, that's kind of how I give people stuff like that, explaining intestinal permeability, explaining, food sensitivities, explaining LDL and lipid fractionation, talking about, how to chew food, just like we were talking about, like, you know, all the issues people have with GERD and on these PPIs, which is absolutely ridiculous and insane. They should be on it for a short term, if at all. I've never prescribed a PPI. There's other ways to do it, but just getting people off PPIs and teaching people how to chew and rest and
Yes.
digest their food, like how to eat, in what frame of mind and setting, how to eat, not what to eat. different components. And then all the different food plans that they have are incredibly
Yeah,
helpful,
yeah.
if that's what you're asking me. They have all the 25-page documents explaining cardiometabolic health, explaining, ketogenic food plans or the Mito food plan for brain health and neurodegenerative diseases, if that's your orientation, the elimination diet. And all of them have 25-page recipes, 25-page explaining the why in nursing language, really. And nurses could use that and explain that. And then they have a one-page document to give the patient so they know what foods they should be eating. I think all of these things begin to launch people to be thinking about how they're eating, what they're eating, and how what they're eating is impacting them. Like they've got food journals that I use often. Those are probably the ones I use a lot. And fasting, they've got handouts on fasting that I think are really cool. I always meet with people, hear the story. I hit their order some labs, and nurse practitioners out there, you can order the labs. Nurses, you don't need to. And then I always launch on whichever lifestyle, maybe one or two that they're ready to embrace. And I give them handouts that kind of match. If it's food, I do that. If it's exercise, I do that. There's handouts on all of the above. They've got meditation handouts, some of which meditation and mindfulness, some of which I helped write in the day. I know those handouts well. Dude, handout, depending on where you're starting, you can give them something to go home with and
And
think
I think
about and
using
read
your
about.
portal to like send PDFs is a great tip too. For me, since I do consulting and not primary care anymore, I have my patients do a huge intake before the first visit and then I sit down and go over it. What level of information are you getting from people before you meet them for the first time? Are you waiting or how are you making that work in your practice?
In my particular portal, they fill out a whole health history and with all kinds of data about what they're eating, how they're sleeping, how they're moving. It's all filled out ahead of time. And I read it ahead of time. I do two things. I read it over. I have their meds and everything already in there. So we're not wasting time on that stuff, on data points. I'm not like looking at my computer and anything like that. I can engage with them because I already have the data in there and I've already looked it over. Then I typically start with, "Hey, I read everything in your portal. It's great. Thank you for filling it out. I know it was a lot, but it's truly helpful to me. I want to know. I know what you wrote, but I want you to tell me the story." Just kind of start rolling from the beginning. Then I get the narrative, which is
It
always
is, yeah.
different than the writing. Then I can just sit and listen to their story and then it clicks in like where I need to go. And I don't have to worry because the rest of the data is in there. I've got their allergies. I've got their meds. I've got their stuff. And then I always check to make sure, is there any other meds? I do my due diligence, but that's how I roll. I get a lot up front so that I can just be with them and do the
Thank you for
rest.
sharing all that because I think that the practical part of this, when I interview people and when I talk to other nurses and nurse practitioners about functional medicine, we tend to get in the weeds about functional medicine, but how to use it in your practice is so important to talk about too, and it doesn't get talked about enough. I like to try to remember to ask these questions is like, how are you actually using this and staying organized and managing your time? Not everybody is ready to hear what we have to offer. And it sounds like your practice is more people that are seeking like integrative and functional providers. Do you feel like?
Yeah, yeah, they're seeking me out, right? Because they've been a million people. I don't advertise, but I've got more than enough clients. It's old school, it's word of mouth, but they're seeking out this type of care at this point. And like I said before, I guess there's a level of self-selection because they have to fill out all this data ahead of time. But this is me, and my partner doesn't do this. Even if they haven't filled it out, if they still want to come, I'll do it old school, right? Because sometimes you have people that are 70 or 80, they're not good on a portal, it's too much for them. It's like, just come, right? Or they speak the language well, like, just come. I don't not see them if they don't do it, but I would say 90% of the people fill it out and it's a lot. I'm asking a lot of information about them and they all come in. I said, "I know it's a lot. Thank you for filling it out." And the first thing they say to it was a lot, but I learned a lot. It made me think about all of these things ahead of time. It's kind of a good exercise in having them ponder about themselves and what's been happening and what's like the order of
I
it.
think
And so they've
and the other
engaged.
thing that I find that happens with that is people by the end of that visit and you making some connections for them, like the telling their story back with the timeline, that they are like somebody listened. Somebody took a minute to connect some dots that I've been repeating over and over again to the 5 providers that we already been to, and I feel like that's one of the biggest things I hear from people is, "Wow, thanks for taking the time to listen. Nurse coaches, that's a big thing we do is the listening and making connections for them because people typically have a pretty good sense for what might be the root cause a lot of the time, but hearing it from somebody and the why behind it can be so motivating. But I want to acknowledge that not every nurse has time, right? And we talk about how like my course isn't like focused on building a business because I want nurses to know that they should be using this in the hospital and in the clinic they're already at. We need to use this in every aspect of nursing, not just in private practices. But I want to say that a lot of nurses end up wanting to have their own practice once they learn coaching and functional medicine. And I am wondering if you could share a little bit about what it was like for you. Like, did you already have like an entrepreneur kind of bone in your body before any of this? Because for me, I 0% did until nurse coaching.
I didn't know that I did, but I guess I did. But I saw it. So I'm going to say two things. I'm getting
Yeah,
off
yeah.
topic, then I'll come back. Two or three of the most important questions that I ask people. First one is, when's the last time you felt well? I think that's a super important question. And just like you said, I always ask because that like makes them define it. And then what was going on around that time? And I always ask them, what do you think is going on? Because people more times than not will say like that mom did. She was exposed. They know what it is. They know what was going on that added to it. They just don't know what to do about it or how to organize and begin to dig themselves, reverse engineer it. I think that those are important kind of questions is when was the last time you're well? What was going on around it? What do you think it is? And at the end, I always close with, what else do you think I need to know to take better care of you that we haven't touched on? And they always find something because we got off on a tangent or something like that. I bring them back to what they want, not where I wanted it to go. And they'll always say, you know what? You need to know this about me. And it may have nothing to do with medicine. Like the lady I talked to today, I asked her that question at the end. She started then telling me about how her son almost committed suicide and that she had all this stress and what she did about it and like all this kind of stuff that at the very end. And that was the 2 years that, she started getting sick and losing her hair. That was an important part of the story, but she glossed over it because it wasn't medical. She didn't think it influenced things and threw it in when I asked that question. And not forgetting those key questions and giving people an opportunity. And then entrepreneurial, I had no idea what I was doing. I was terrible with it. I think if you love what you do and you're just passionate. I was just passionate about lifestyle. I think I started when I was working with Joel. We got a bioimpedance machine. And he's like, okay, I'm going to do some labs and then you just do the bioimpedance percent body fat and you help people with weight loss. Seems pretty basic. But then sounds like easy. Then I just loved it because it wasn't about the weight loss. Then I started talking about other things in their life and what was going on and like what were they really hungry for, or what was making them eat, and like looking at the labs and how can we work this way. And then I started coaching. I did this before I ever coached. I didn't know I was coaching. This was 25 years ago before I had any coaching skills. I started like, well, what do you want to do? What can you do? No coaching background at all. This is before Inca was even Inca. This is before any of the coaching programs were teaching this. Like I started doing coaching, must have been like 27, 28 years ago around weight loss, but it was never around weight loss. I had people coming in. Joel used to laugh. People keep coming back. They haven't even lost any weight. I said, well, we're not
Right.
there yet. We're working like the why and the self-esteem and the feeling good about themselves. And they're slowly making changes and they wanted to move first before they took away their food. I think if you love what you do and you just start rolling with it, and then things evolved, right? Then I started getting busy. Then I started doing functional medicine. Then I went back and got my APRN and then started blending all these things. And, before I knew it, if you love what you do and you love your patients and care for your patients, they just keep coming in the door and your practice defines itself. It's like you're led. I feel like the path opened for me and I didn't necessarily have a understanding of where I was going, but I kept just like, oh, this feels good. And I love this. I'm just going to keep going in this direction. Now I have my own practice up here in Ridgefield, Joel, which is near where I live. It's doing phenomenal. I love it. I'm doing everything I love to do. I'm doing a mixture of pap smears and young girls and, older women in menopause and people with, SIBO and like all kinds of interesting. I'm never bored. And somebody new is always walking in the door with interesting things, but I love the people. I love the stories. Like I always say, I'm not good at remembering someone's name,
Yep.
but I will remember every
Yeah.
detail of the story you told me. But that's nursing, right? It's fun. This is a great time to be a nurse. You don't have to be a nurse practitioner to do this stuff. You absolutely don't. When I started, I was not a nurse practitioner. When I started all this kind of stuff, I was really doing nurse coaching.
A lot
There
of
you have
nurses
it.
ask me, now that you know this, because a lot of nurse students in my course in particular are RNs that maybe wanna be they're looking for something different in their career, right? They're being called to something else, and they maybe don't know what that is yet, and they want me to tell them if they should be a nurse practitioner or not. A lot of people will ask me, "If you had it to do over again, would you do that?" And I say, "This isn't the answer for you, but for me, absolutely, I would do it again," because I think that you and I have in common this kind of going against the grain a little bit of, things in life, maybe the particular healthcare, right? Like I was never okay with healthcare the way it is, even in nursing school, like you're talking about. And I was always looking for something different, and functional medicine was that for me. But I feel like I've always been listening to that voice in myself to go do this and go do that. And I don't always know why yet. And going with Inca, when I first got there, I was like, what am I doing here? Like I just dove in and it made a lot of sense later. But it all circles back to what you're talking about is like when you're doing what you really care about, people can see that and it really connects with people and speaks to them. Yeah. And I tell my students all the time, your best marketing tool is sending people back better to their primary care provider that advocates for functional medicine.
100%. I get a ton of referrals from doctors that their patients feel better and they've told them about 100%. That's how you grow a business. Just do good medicine, do good care. You don't need to be a nurse practitioner. The only reason I went back is because I was lecturing and I felt I needed the cred. Now, I'm glad I did, but you don't need to. You can do this as an RN and coaching. You can move the dial much. And I really feel that RNs with a coaching degree are probably one of the most vital people on the collaborative care team. Vital, vital, vital. You don't need to, if you want to go back and it calls to you, but you went through it. I went through it. It's a hard road. It's economically hard and it's physically hard and it's emotionally draining. And I wasn't particularly interested. I was just like, I just got to get the degree. And some of the stuff we were learning, I was like, I disagree. I disagree. I disagree. I got to put this on the test to
Right.
pass.
Yeah.
Like, I just got to
I
say
know
this.
different, but yeah.
Different, but I'm going to put this down so that I can actually pass my certification. It's if it speaks to you, go for it, but you don't need to. There's other ways around it. I think blending the coaching with the nursing is the way. You can
Well,
have
and
a
like
whole
we've talked
business.
about, how much of what
Yeah.
I do every day is really RN scope of practice, and it's almost all. Yeah, like if
100%.
I could get lab work, like because 'cause I'm not writing prescriptions anymore. So I'm like, if I can get lab work for people, everything I do is RN scope of practice, right? Because I'm educating people and letting them I say make your patient their own primary care provider. They get to make the decisions for themselves about their care once they have
I love
the
it.
knowledge. With IFM, Monique has a lot of connections to Inca from back in the day. I was in a cohort where it was still in person, but it was after you. I got to meet a lot of the same people. We've had connections with a lot of the same people for years. And because of IFM having an AIC online for the last many years, I didn't actually get to meet Monique in person until last year at the AIC event in Orlando. And that's when we talked about having this conversation today. But Monique, for those of you that don't know, I mean, like I was watching her on IFM's content for years, like learning from her and getting to see an nurse coach, nurse practitioner that practices functional medicine on stage in front of all of those people live and via digital access too was like really exciting for me because like you were talking about, like getting nurses more in a role of like acknowledging that we have something to offer the healthcare system that has as much value as other types of providers do, and sometimes in some cases more. I'm thinking of you were just talking about the value of a nurse and we talk so much in functional medicine about the value of groups and that RNs can run these groups in clinics. I really have been encouraging my students more and more like advocate to run groups and you can run medical visits in your clinic that can be billed through insurance. Yeah.
100%.
So I
100%.
wanted to say all that to acknowledge, like, you have been laying the groundwork for many of us for decades, and I really appreciate that you've done that, and, like, I really value all the work that you've done, and I would love for you in the last couple of minutes to just share some of your thoughts on nurses in this space and the future of us moving forward.
Well, mutual admiration here. I'm just so thrilled to have you in the space with me and have a partner in crime to do this with and educate the nurses and bring them into the fold. Nurses are going to play a huge part. I mean, it is our time. It is our moment. We're the most vital part of the collaborative care team because we can go back and forth and we have all these different skill sets. It's innate in us, right? It's not foreign. It's not, we're fine tuning it, but it's not new for us to think of the systems are connected and these pieces. I think the sky's the limit and everybody needs to, figure out how they're going to work on the collaborative care team, whether they need an advanced education, but RNs and coaching combination in my mind can't be beat. You can have your own practice. You can do, especially with the direct to consumer labs now, like Mark Hyman, my friend and colleague, he has his own lab where patients can order their own labs directly and show up to an RN. You don't have to order labs. People can order their own labs now through Quest and Function Lab, and they just need someone to help them with the lifestyle pieces. Like, what do I do? That's a nursing scope of practice. Nurses can look at that. They can understand it. They know how to coach them with all the lifestyle stuff that they need to do, even though they're not the ones. Just like you said, people need to be their own primary care. Well, this is a moment in time where people can be, they can order all this stuff without going to a clinician. I'm not saying clinicians aren't needed, but this is the space that nurses should be working on this, not lay people with no background. It should be nurse coaches working on that space because we know how to. Those are
Yeah,
my
thank you so
words.
much. I think everything that you've shared today is just so inspiring for all of our listeners. I'm going to share in the show notes how people can learn more about you. In particular, I'm just going to encourage people to, I tell my students all the time, the course that I teach lays that foundation in nursing language, but then Monique is teaching in it the advanced practice modules for IFM, and you do some for the AFMCP too, don't you? Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm speaking at this one too, the wise use of these GLP-1 agonists and co-agonists, people are Ozempic and Mounjaro and
That's a
like
great
my
topic.
thoughts
Thank
on
you for
that.
doing that. Okay, so you guys look for her when you're doing your IFM training because she's in there making a difference for healthcare, for our patients, and for nurses, which I am so grateful for. Thank you, Monique. And
You're welcome.
everybody,
Thank
until
you,
next
Bridget.
time, be well. Thank you for tuning in to the Functional Nurse Podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps other nurses find this movement. To learn more about our programs and join the community at IFN, visit fxnursing.com. Together, we're not just rethinking healthcare, we are rebuilding it from the inside out.